Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Folks, I'd like to pick up from where we left off this morning, or really talking about the creating a framework for us to understand our own inner development and how we kind of unfold as beings. Last night I mentioned that what we're busy with in this place, our specific interest in this place, is to give people a framework for understanding both how their intention and their attention matures. And when we're looking at the issue of intention, then the reason why we say the sort of the key variable that is concerned with your maturation is really concerned with how your intention matures, is because we know that obviously if you think of maturation as a process, then any process is kind of you can define as an incremental move between a beginning and an end. That's a process. If you see maturation from that point of view, then clearly the beginning of the process is birth, and the end of the process is death. And what's interesting and important about both of these moments of birth and death is that they, from an intent point of view, they are the only unconditional moments that you face in your life. Because at birth, you had nothing yet. In other words, at birth, whatever you're going to get, you will still get. And, at death, you don't get anything. You give it all away. But then the challenge one can make and say, this is when I die, I don't give anything. Everything gets taken away from me, which is also logically true. But then that just invokes another question, and that's what's the difference between giving something and having it taken from you? And clearly that's not in the thing. I mean, if one person has 5,000 rand stolen from them and another person gives 5,000 rand to a charity, the difference is not the 5,000 rand. The difference is in the intent of the person who's going through the experience. And if you view the loss of the 5,000 rand like death, it's definitely going to happen to you, then clearly it is the person who gave the 5,000 rand voluntarily has the successful experience, when the other person has a miserable experience, which basically indicates that the process of maturation is really the process of the maturation of intent to give unconditionally. That's one way of looking at how we develop and how we mature. The language of intent is a bit clumsy to understand the higher parts of our development, because when one says give unconditionally, that in a sense messes with how we understand intent. Intent as an idea has within it a forward-focusing, an outcome-based sort of orientation. What do you intend to do? If I asked you that question, you would almost by definition refer to something into the future. So, how do you then understand or get a language around the intent of somebody who's foregone all future, who's foregone all outcomes? So the issue of intent is useful, particularly when we start on this path, but it's not adequate. That suggests that the issue of morality, because the issue of intent is about whether you're giving or taking, the issue of intent is concerned with a moral problem. The issue of morality is necessary, but it's not sufficient to understand the higher reaches of our own development. Because a moral person is by definition a person who's doing what Allah wants from them. Their intent is to serve, is to give. That's all very noble, nobody's knocking that. But how do you deal with the intent of somebody who's foregone all outcomes? Because if we say you're giving unconditionally, that's what you're doing. So on one level, what we seek to do here is we seek to give people the beginning of the toolage that they need to explore their own intent. That opens a door to a deeper and a more subtle exploration, which is concerned with the maturation of our attention. The issue of intention and attention are linked, clearly, because what's important to you is where you'll place your attention. But the issue of attention doesn't, in a sense, have the moral overlay that the problem of attention has. The issue of attention presents itself almost as a very pragmatic problem. It's a practical problem. It's not a moral problem. What are you making significant now? Is a practical problem. It's where you're directing your attention. So all of the practices that we do here are really as much concerned, if not more so, with the cultivation and the development of our attention and what they have to do with our development of our intention. So we seek to be good Muslims, and we seek to encourage others to be good Muslims, and we forbid what is injurious and wrong, and we encourage and recommend what is correct. But we try and do a little bit more than that. We try and not just concern ourselves with how we act over there, but how we are on the inside, how we see, how we perceive. This skill of working on the inside relates to working with your intent, or rather the skill of working on attention relates to the issue of intention in a number of ways. The first connection between the intent and attention is a phenomenon that you could call outward or inward gatheredness. These are two very important concepts: outward gatheredness and inward gatheredness. If you can imagine, well, you don't have to imagine this. I mean, just if you look directly at somebody, then you see at some point, at the limit of your peripheral vision, there's a boundary beyond which you no longer see anything. We've come to refer to that boundary as the window of perception. This window of perception is a very important dividing line between two very different realms, two very different worlds. First of all, there's that which gets presented to you inside that window. We refer to that which gets presented to you inside the window of perception, and in front of you, the outward. Then there is the looker, the person on this side of the window of perception. You can refer to that realm as the inward. So this issue of attention is really in the first instance works on this binary opposite of the distinction between the inward and the outward, and refers to the window of perception as the boundary between those two opposites. Now, my attention can function in one of two ways with regard to this window. My attention can either be outwardly gathered, or my attention is inwardly gathered. That distinction between outward gathered and inward gathered attention is in the first instance a moral problem. Because it's in the first instance a concern with what you either want to get from the world or what you're willing to forego. If I, for instance, want Butanadim's glasses, because they're very nice glasses and they're much better than mine. Actually, I want your timepiece, Butanadim. If I wanted your timepiece, your ability to withhold the timepiece, the watch or whatever, gives you power over me. If I want something from you, your ability to withhold what I want gives you power over me. The effect on how my attention operates is that I'm hooked like a fish. It's almost as if I'm pushed right up to the window of perception and I'm trying to reach into the world to get the thing that I want. Does that make sense? I want to get something. When I want to get something, I'm kind of, my attention's stuck right up. I'm outwardly gathered. If you want something from the world, your attention becomes outwardly gathered. That outward gatheredness produces an alienated state that you can refer to as inward separation. And the reason why you refer to it as inward separation is that you lose your autonomy, you lose your ability to react, you lose your ability to respond. Why? Because this person has power over your state. So consistent with the intent to take is the relationship, the first aspect or relationship between the intent to take and attention is that when your intent is to take, your attention becomes outwardly gathered and inwardly separate. Now, let's assume I forego what I want from Butanadin. It's very difficult, but I work very hard and I forego. And how do you forego? It's not just a negating thing to do. There's both a negation and an affirmation in foregoing. You forego in order to do what is required of you rather than to do what you want to get. So our argument is that in any situation that you're in, there's always two variables that are operative. There's what you want to get from the world and what Allah wants from you. Basically, what does the world require of you? So it's not just about a case of foregoing what you want to get. It's deliberately shifting your attention from that thing to what you should give. That shift creates the condition where the other loses control over your state. So when I shift my intent from what I'm trying to get from Butanadin to I can be helpful to him, the impact on my attention is that I'm no longer like a fish. I'm not hooked. I'm not stuck up on the window. Literally my being pulls back deeper within myself. I become inwardly gathered and outwardly separate. This is why we need to be moral beings. Because being moral beings is the first step towards developing inward gatheredness. The problem with this issue of being moral beings is that it is also, it's a minefield. And the reason why it's a minefield is that inside that problem is also the problem of good opinion of others. What are they going to say about me? One of the reasons why we don't misbehave is not because we don't want to misbehave. We're terrified somebody's going to find out and we're going to be shamed. You know? And so you understand that's one of the reasons why this issue of being the good person is partly quite a problematic thing. Because, you know, I mean, yes, pursue being a good person, but that's things so fraught. It's so deeply concerned with, do they see me as a good person? Now, you must understand that if you want to be seen to be a good person, you become more manipulable, you become more outwardly gathered, and more inwardly separate than what you would be if you just wanted things from people. So if I wanted your watch, then your ability to withhold the watch gives you power over me. If I forego that by giving attention, then you can't manipulate me anymore. However, you also can't manipulate me if you actually give me the watch, because now I've got it. So when you're dealing with physical things, there's a limit to the degree to which you can be manipulated. But let's assume I don't want Buddha Nadim's watch. I want him to like me. But I'm actually a very nice person, Buddha Nadim. I mean, I know I'm very nasty, but I'm very nice. Please like me. Yeah. Yeah, that ticked. If I want Buddha Nadim's good opinion of me, I can never get control over it like I can get control over the watch. In other words, if you want to be liked by somebody else, you're far more vulnerable to that person. You're far more manipulable to that person than what you would be if you just wanted things from them. So sitting under the stone of being a good person, good, like lots of O's, good, you know, good, oh, terrible. Sitting under the stone of being a good person, there's the scorpion. And the scorpion is my concern with other people's opinion of me. Which is why, when you start on your inner world, in your inner life, you have to be more, you've got to start working on something more than how you are seen. As I said, your intent to give creates the possibility of becoming inwardly gathered and outwardly separate. But what are you gathering to when you become inwardly gathered? What is this reality that sits behind this window of perception, this thing behind you, where your looking is operating from? Does that place where you're looking, your perception is operating from, does it have a behind to it? It has no behind to it. I mean, if you just think, what does it feel like? Because you can't do a visual thing, because that would be an imagination. What does it feel like? If you feel behind here, it just plummets into a vast, indescribably peaceful depth. Like an emptiness. But not an alienating emptiness. It's just like a homecoming emptiness. That's your nature, that's where the looker is operating from. When you become inwardly gathered, you start to increasingly inhabit that space. The deeper you are inhabiting that space, the deeper you pull inside yourself, the less vulnerable you become, the less assailable you become. That place is the divine presence. When Allah tells us that He's closer to us than our jugular vein, that place of proximity is that place. It's the place where your looking operates from. In other words, the more you become inwardly gathered, the more you allow yourself to sink into the divine presence. Become close to the divine presence. But you won't get there. It's not possible to occupy that place if what they think of you is so important to you. So maybe you should deliberately misbehave. Folks, there's a place for compliance. But that place is for young people and children. When you start getting to your 50s, you better realize that all of these people whose opinion is so important to you won't accompany you where you're going. In fact, they are unbelievably fickle. They'll walk with you to the cover, but they'll put you there, walk away. Hulle los jou daar. They won't come with you. So stop making their opinion of you so significant, because it's a prison. If I take it from first-hand real authority, it's a prison. You have access to something which is infinitely, incalculably, vastly more pleasurable, fulfilling than the adoration of 100,000 fans of a rock star on the stage. Over here, on the inside. Why are you allowing yourself to give up the treasure for the pittance? Our business in this place is to help people discover the treasure. That's what we're going to do here, and that's what we're doing here. That's the purpose of our company, that's the purpose of our companionship, that's the purpose of our practices. Yes, we are going to try and be good Muslims, but we're not going to try and be good Muslims. The saccharine stuff has no place here. So no, you can't get drunk on the property, and you can't. I mean, that's just no. But I mean, there's also, if the dookie is like this or like that or whatever, it's just nonsense. Don't sweat the small stuff. Okay. Don't sweat the small stuff. You're not here to get my good opinion of you. You're not here to get the good opinion of each other. You're here to become inwardly gathered. You're here to discover who you are. You're here to engage a journey which you will never get to the end of. This place behind your eyes is infinite depth. Infinite means it has no end. It has no place of arrival. While you are alive, while you're a human being on this side of the grave, there's another place for you to explore. There's another vaster and greater reality. That's the extraordinary promise that our Rabb subhanahu wa ta'ala has given us. And that is our birthright. So, what is the most important key rule that we apply here to develop the sense of inward gatheredness and outward separation, which is the inverse of how most people live? Most people are inwardly separate and outwardly gathered. The most important thing that we do here is that we try to incrementally make sure that what we do is more important than the outcome of what we do. Right. Because, again, another parallel to the relationship between intention and attention is the shift from the intent to take to the intent to give is consistent with the shift of attention from outcome into process. So what do we mean by this? You watch somebody walking up a hill, and you're outside of the person. You're not behind their eyes. You're not seeing what's going. You're not seeing how their intent operates. No. There's two possible ways that the person can be walking up the hill. They can be walking up the hill to get to the top of the hill. So I'm doing this walking. Why am I doing this walking? In order to get to the top of the hill. That way of the patterning of the person's attention in the process of walking is consistent with the intent to take. I'm doing this to get that. So the aim is the getting, and the giving, the doing, is the means to do the getting. That's not the only way that you can use your attention walking up a hill. You must have had some activities in your life that you do purely for the pleasure of doing it. Surely. There's something in your life you've done, or that you do, that's just enjoyable to do. I mean, probably the most, I mean, there's a number of examples. Some of them are not from polite companies, so I won't speak about them. The most obvious one that comes to mind is music. Do you listen to music to get through listening to the music? Why do you, I mean, do you understand what I'm trying to say? Listening to music is by definition not an outcome-focused activity. Hey? If it was outcome-focused, then the best piece of music would be one single bar long. Bum, very good piece of music. Bum, bum, no, it's not quite as good. Bum, 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 that's terrible. You know, bum, 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 what? It's too long. Do you understand? You don't listen to music to get to the outcome of listening to the music. You listen to the music to listen to the music. In fact, sometimes if you really enjoy the music, you're almost a little bit sad when it's finished. Oh. In other words, in that experience of listening to the music, your attention wasn't concerned with the outcome. Your attention was concerned with the listening, the process of listening to the music. So this is not as far an idea as it seems, this idea of shifting your attention from outcome into process. You must have eaten a bowl of soup that was so delicious. I wish this never ends. Just go, oh, let's slow this down. You know, smell it, whatever. I mean, you really, you sit deep. So if we go back to this idea of the man walking up the hill, there's one way he walks up the hill is he's walking to get to the top of the hill. Another way that he can walk up the hill is that actually the top of the hill is his means to have a good walk. I mean, he wants a walk. You can't have a good walk if it's just like flat or around the pool, you know. So I want to have a nice walk. Well, oh, well, okay, there's the hill. So we'll see, that's an affirmation, subhanAllah. The top of the hill is his means to walk well. So what is significant for him in the walking isn't the getting there, isn't the outcome. In other words, what is significant is what you give attention to. What is significant in the walking is the process. He realizes that without an outcome you can't have a process. But the point isn't the outcome, the point is the process. So what we were saying is that consistent with a shift of intention from taking to giving, also the other effect on attention is that your attention shifts from outcome into process. In other words, you don't just do things to get them done, you do things to do them well. You savor doing things. You savor your salah. You savor your salah like you would savor a really, really, really good plate of food.
Shaykh, I'm so sorry, forgive me, I don't
Please.
mean to interject. I have this very nagging thought, you know, in terms of what you've just outlined, what you've sketched. How does that reconcile, for example, with compliance in your salah?
Okay.
The process is not appreciated often. It happens to all of us, right? It's simply just the compliance. So
Well, that's got nothing to do with the process. It's got everything to do with how your intent calibrates around doing the process. So I'm standing on the musalla. What are the possible intentions that I could have for doing this salah? I could say I'm doing this because it's a requirement of Sharia. Right. I could say to myself, I'm doing this because otherwise they're going to see I'm a bad Muslim if I don't. I could stand on the masala saying, I'm doing this because isn't it wonderful just to have a moment of escape from all of that out there? I can stand on the masala saying, I'm going to do this and really savor the experience of doing it. Which means I'm going to engage all my senses while I'm doing this. I'm going to feel the masala on my feet. I'm going to slow it right down. I'm going to feel my breath as it comes in and goes out as I do the dhikrs in the salah. I mean, in fact, I'm deliberately going to connect the salah with my breath. So I've described four possible, there's 1,000. There's hundreds of thousands of different intentions that you can have. That's What's the difference of those four? Well, there's no objective difference. It's what the Masali chooses. You choose. You choose whether you're going to walk onto the Masala just dutifully because, otherwise I don't get enough chits for Akhirah. Or you choose, I'm going to step onto the Masala, I'm going to enjoy the experience. In fact, your autonomy to choose, to affirm, to claim process over outcome is the one thing nobody can take. They can take anything else away from you, but they cannot take that away from you. Your greatest freedom is your ability to shift your attention from outcome into process. Surely, let's assume you're in an absolutely miserable condition. You're in an iron lung, you can only move your left eye. Ooh, terrible, imagine that. You can decide, I'm stuck in this situation, What can I do? Well, maybe I've still got some volition around my breath, so I'll breathe and rest my attention on my breath. I'll actually give attention to how my left eye moves. Nobody can take that freedom away from you. Nobody can take the freedom away from you to decide to make the experience you're having the most important experience that's ever happened, or to make it punishment. Nobody can take that autonomy away. Your greatest autonomy, folks, lies in your capacity to deliberately shift your attention from outcome into process. This is one of the reasons why there's no such thing as a human being who is actually a victim. Victimhood is a chosen state. And no matter how oppressed you are, and again, please, it's not saying people don't get oppressed. I'm not saying that there aren't such things as political terrors and injustices happening. However, for you, the oppressed, you, the individual, the self, that experience of oppression is a choice. Because the expression only exists for you insofar as you've designated it as an oppression. Explain to me why some people can do dental work without anesthesia. I mean, for me, it strikes me as the most outrageous thing. I want to say to the guy, what's the matter with you? What are you trying to prove? You're tough. I know people who prefer not to have injections, anesthesia with dental work. And you ask them, how do you do this? They don't try and evade the pain. They give attention to the pain. What's the difference between a pleasant and an unpleasant stimulus? Yes. Well, it's whether you've designated it as pleasant or unpleasant. So this thing with dogs and Muslims is always a very fascinating thing for me, because you can get some Muslims, particularly in certain parts of the world, like Southeast Asia. I mean, they literally, they see this thing as shaitanic. I mean, literally, they go they go hysterical. It's like the worst curse. It's like a demon. Take it away. I grew up in a world where this was not the case. This was not my experience of dogs. I look at this thing, I say, now clearly, that person's reaction to a dog and my reaction to dogs got nothing to do with the dog. In fact, the person is probably blindly ignorant of this. It's like these two humans. There's nothing which is terrible, which remains terrible, if you choose to change your designation of it as terrible. That's your unalienable right. And the more you do that, by the way, the more you deliberately choose to shift how you engage things from judging them to being curious about them, is the more inwardly gathered you become. Because you only get hooked by your judgments. Your judgments produce what you designate as tolerable or intolerable about the world, and that therefore produces what you want to change about the world. So, another introduction, another idea of the relationship between attention and intention is consistent, if you like, the register of the internal dialogue of somebody who's here to take is judgment. What I mean by judgment is as they walk through the world, if you manage to get like a microphone, like a thought microphone, we should design that, don't you think? A thought microphone. You put it in through the ear. You know, so we record what's going on in there. Horrifying. You know, if you take one of these people, you put a thought microphone in their ear, as they're walking through the road, what you will see on your recording is ongoing approvals and disapprovals. And probably a lot more disapprovals than approvals. Hi, look at that. Look at how she's dressed. Look at that scarf. A person of receptive attention, a person who if you're, the degree to which your intent shifts to how you can help, how you can give, is the degree to which the register of your internal dialogue becomes curious. You don't waste time judging things, you're just interested in how they are. So that which is objectionable stays something that is not desired, unpreferred, but it doesn't overwhelm you because you can give it attention. That's another attribute of inward gatheredness. Inward gatheredness produces an unassailable state. You cannot be overwhelmed. You cannot be destroyed. You cannot be taken on by them. Why? Because you're operating in the presence of the Rabb. The more inwardly gathered you become, the more he becomes your explicit, immediately at hand, absolutely proximate ally. Jy beklei nie met my nie. Be careful. You're not fighting with me. So, wouldn't you be curious to start developing this taste? Huh? So use your Zawia. Commit to what we're doing here. The price tag is just a little bit of effort. It's a little bit of work. We are so used to thinking of work as stuff you do over there. On the outside, on the outward, in the window of perception. You know, I need to go to work, earn a living, work. There's perfectly legitimate work to be done on the inside, behind the window of perception. And you do that work, and you get given the garden, you get given, it's indescribable, the prize of prizes, the stars in your hand. The more you pursue that work, and dare I say, the more successful you are at pursuing that work, is the degree to which you become weak, assailable, compromisable, manipulable, just alienated. Otherwise, explain to me why. You have these incredibly powerful or famous or wealthy people who are miserable. How's that possible? How's that possible? They've got it all. He's got the yacht, he's got the plane, he's got whatever. And yet they're miserable. How's that possible? Because the more you go out there, the further you go from who you are and what you are. You are so close to this infinity that sits behind. So intimate with that at some level, there's no difference. Like a drop in an ocean. Who's you? Who's he? Who are we? It's the same. Closer than close to your jugular vein. So close that it's indivisible. That's who you are. So you want to give up that vastness, that autonomy, for a bit of tinsel out there. Ish. So as I was saying, the first rule for what we do here, the first attribute of the endeavor of what we do here, is that we do things to do them well. We give attention to the process. We learn how to savor the things that we do. We learn to savor our salah. We learn to savor our dhikr. We learn to savor our food. We indeed learn to savor our company. We do things to do them well. And so when we do the dhikr, please do attend to that. You know, please do attend to whatever the form is of the dhikr that we're doing. Create the same sound as the people around you. Make the same movements. Become one with the thing and don't stand out on your own. Allow yourself to melt. I pray that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala grants us success on this path. I pray that He grants us companionship on this path. I pray that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala grants us the wisdom to be able to apply this institution, this Zawia, to this enabling others on this journey. I pray that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala grants us nearness to Him, grants us annihilation in Him, grants us death before we die. إن الله وملائكته يصلون على النبي يا أيها الذين آمنوا صلوا عليه وسلموا تسليما اللهم صل على سيدنا محمد عبدك ورسولك نبينا وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم تسليما سبحان ربك رب العزة عما يصفون والسلام على المرسلين والحمد لله.